Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week on the podcast, it is episode number 92 of the show, and I have 7 new LitRPG titles just for you folks at home, including War God's Mantle, Ascension. This is the first book in that series. Aetheria Offline, a LitRPG Saga. Down She Falls, a LitRPG World, a World Ingot series, book 1. Dungeon Crisis, this is book 2 in the Glendaria Awakens trilogy. Also, Soul Reckoning, a LitRPG adventure, Veilwalkers, book 2. Then Headshots, 2 in the Head, book 2 in that particular series. And last but not least, Trap of the Potentate, this is the Dark Herbalist, book number 3. There you go, folks. But of course, before we begin with the reviews, we always go to LitRPG News. And in LitRPG News, our first story involves a great big congratulatory shout out to Dakota Crouch. He's the author of the Divine Dungeon series. The audiobook for his first book in that series, The Divine Dungeonborn, was actually nominated and made the top 5 of Audible's fantasy audiobooks for the year 2017. So I just want to give him a great big shout out for writing such an amazing story, and of course for I think it's Tantor. It's either Tantor or Podium, but they did an amazing job in getting that audiobook out there into the fans, and the fans love it apparently. So congratulations to you, Dakota. Okay, also in LitRPG News, we have Luke Chmalenko, author of the Ascend Online series. His latest novel in that series, Ascend Online Book 2, Legacy of the Fallen, is doing great. I love the book. It was really great. I enjoyed it immensely. Give it a great review. It's currently in the hundreds on Amazon's rankings as of like this recording. So it's great. That's on the top 1 or 200 out of all the Amazon books out there currently as ebooks. So that's really good. So good job, man. He's also doing an AMA or Ask Me Anything on the LitRPG subreddit. It'll be on January 20th at 1 p.m. So this upcoming weekend. You can go there now and write questions in the thread if you can't make it live. But he'll be doing that there. So there you go, folks. Also in LitRPG News, we have Vasily Mahanenko, author of the Way of the Shaman series, Galacticon and the Dark Paladin series. He has written his second article on how to write LitRPG. This is a very interesting series that he's done. The title of this particular article is Game Mechanics Part 2, or Part 2, as I like to call them, presenting a fantasy game world. So he is continuing on in the fundamentals of creating a great LitRPG world for your story to exist in, and that world building is where this story is emphasized the most. He talks about creating a world specifically tailored to LitRPG. The game mechanics have to make sense. You have to figure out in advance of writing the story, what your rules are going to be, because it's not just traditional fantasy rules. And a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, the rules for the world are basically founded on physics, the normal world. But in a LitRPG world, that may not necessarily be the case, because those worlds are very often based on our experiences as video game players, and video game rules can be very different as far as what things are possible. You can walk through people, you can sometimes walk through things, you can sometimes make headshots from 2 miles away, depending on your setup, or you can cast magic spells on hotkeys, and they're cooldown timers, and all that stuff that's fundamental to making that RPG world believable. And so he does go into depth a little bit about some of the things you should consider when you're world building for your particular LitRPG story. Of course, he doesn't go into too much detail, but it's a good read. I encourage you to go read it, even if you're just enjoying reading LitRPG. It's fun. Okay. Also in LitRPG News, we have the Dragon Awards from DragonCon. Yay! Now, if you don't know what that is, DragonCon is a yearly convention in Atlanta, Georgia. Really super big sci-fi, fantasy. A bunch of fandoms go there. There's a bunch of panels. It's Comic-Con, except in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's just really fun. Now, every year they also do the Dragon Awards, which is a fan-driven award program, I want to say. Basically, fans nominate and vote for their favorite authors and other contributors. And the fans basically determine who wins these awards. So, the best sci-fi, novel of the year, or the best, fantasy science fiction, or the best whatever. There's a huge number of like options to nominate people for. You can check it out, but it's totally free. You don't have to like be a member of anything. You just go there, you click on the link in the show notes, you register, you confirm your email, and you nominate the authors that you love. Now just be aware that there are specific rules. They're basically trying to stop people from spoofing the system or making multiple entries for this, for the same author. So pay attention to the rules. I believe you can only nominate one title from an author for one particular category. Like you can put as many different titles in whatever categories you want to, but one title, one category, and in their like fine print they say if you nominate more than one title for an author for multiple categories, your nomination is nulled. And so, so this is basically their way of like preventing spamming from like particular fans. You know what I mean? So go there, go check it out. A number of LitRPG authors will be at DragonCon this year, as they were last year. So go nominate your favorite authors. I know James A. Hunter is going, myself is going. I believe Aloran Kong, he lives in Atlanta, so he'll be there as well. So a bunch of other fun authors are going to be there as well. A lot of the guys from our DragonCon adventure that I did a nice video of last year in 2017 should be showing up again. Hopefully, cross our fingers and we can all hang out. But I think it would be really cool if I know one of us got nominated for something at DragonCon Awards. Nobody won though, so I think it would be really cool if somebody nominated and won. I think that'd be awesome. But like so, we'll have a link in the show notes. Go click on it and go nominate folks. There you go. And that's it for LitRPG News. We have a couple titles out that are out now that I will not be, if I'm not reviewing this week, but they're currently, I want to make sure you're aware of them. I'll probably be checking them out next week on the show. This includes Devils, Demons, and Deadmen, a LitRPG thriller, Kings and Conquests, Book 1. Also, Fract 7 is out as well. I won't be reviewing this one in particular just because the novel, the last few times I've reviewed it, just wasn't LitRPG. And the series on the whole still is. But it seems like the author just is not as interested in writing a LitRPG story as he is in just telling a story that'd be action adventure in a game world. I'm like, that's not LitRPG for me. I kind of lost interest. But I know there are still fans of Fragged out there, so I'm letting you know that it's out if you want to go pick it up. Okay, new in LitRPG audiobooks. This is actually, there were more releases for these audiobooks than there were for potentially ebooks, which is kind of cool, including The Way of the Clan. This is book 3 of the World of Aetheria out there. So it's book 3 is out as an audiobook now. Also, the first 2 books in the Weirdest Noob series came out at the exact same time, which I think is kind of cool. The Weirdest Noob, and of course, the Locked a Slave and the Locked Land. So you can actually go check them out if you've been waiting for them to come out as audiobooks to listen to them. I've enjoyed the ebooks version, so go check them out. Of course, we'll also have in the show notes the links to the full review for the ebook versions if you're curious if they're even good stories or not. There you go. Also out as an audiobook, though, book 3 in the Amarilla series for the Guild. So that's kind of cool. So you can go check that out there by Michael Chatfield. Book 3 is out. I know a lot of people have been like chomping in the bit for this entire series to come out. It's just taking time, folks. Here's book 3. Enjoy it for the whatever 15-20 hours that it's going to be, probably. Also out as an ebook is Hellions. This is Sigil Online book 2. Written by Jeff Sproul, narrated by Jeff Hayes, who's nice enough to actually drop us a sample of that particular audiobook for listeners to listen to. So I'm going to start playing that right now.
The brainless creatures groaned as he dismembered them. Their blood was like oil as it leaked and poured from their fallen bodies. A second later, their bodies dissipated in a flare of colored particles, their forms dying.
"Don't let them touch you,"
Red Shotgun called.
"There's something really wrong with them. They're not just some regular zombies." "Got it,"
Riley replied as he brought his scythe up and swung in the opposite direction. The reach of the weapon was invaluable to him in this situation. A sword might have allowed the zombies to get too close. He hadn't had a good opportunity to use this weapon yet, at least not in a combat scenario. Despite the fact that they were being surrounded by an overwhelming force, his lips curled. He slashed and cut with his new weapon, rending deep gashes and tearing off limbs. This was the most fun he'd had in weeks. Minutes flashed by like seconds as he fought in the growing melee. He wasn't used to fighting like this in the slightest. Too often, he was stuck behind his friends, just healing them and buffing them with his essence-stealing powers. But this let him be a force to be reckoned with.
And boy, wasn't that amazing, folks. I'm glad you listened to that. I hope you enjoy the work of Jeff Hayes. We did an author, like not so much as an author, but an audiobook narrator interview with him. He does a lot of the narrations for a lot of LitRPG audiobooks. Always does a great job, though. Also out as an audiobook is Project Alpha, written by Ramon Mejia. That's me. Narrated by Jill Smith, who does a wonderful job. She also did the narration for the Adventures in Terror audiobooks that I have out as well. Full disclosure, I wrote this story, so I'm just letting you know it's out there. I also play you a sample from what I have, just because, well, I have all the samples. So there you go. I also kind of made this video thingy with like the cover art as it was working through progress stage, which I kind of like personally. I like to see those little behind the scenes, like, oh, this is what it looked like before the final version. So here that goes.
Even though I still feel drained from the weekend in the zombie dungeon, I go back to classes and work Monday. It's honestly a bit relaxing compared to the tension of surviving in a zombie apocalypse. The food tastes good, the girls on campus are cute, and no one is trying to kill me and eat my brains. Towards the end of October, Lillian messages me to visit her in her office. I'm a little nervous about the visit since I haven't spoken to her since we had that great hug. So, I make sure I've showered and am wearing my best jeans, the ones that make my butt look really good. When I call up the port system and connect to Lillian's office, I spray some cologne, then open the green door connecting our home bases. I walk into her office and find her sitting at her desk, typing away on her computer. She's wearing a long-sleeved striped dress shirt, and her hair is tied back in a ponytail. She has on her business face. Lillian glances at me and waves to a seat in front of her desk. I take the seat she gestures towards and wait while she finishes working. When she finishes typing, the serious expression on her face is replaced with the beautiful smile I've come to expect, and she greets me. "Hey, Anthony. Sorry for making you wait. It's the end of the month and I have to get a bunch of paperwork and accounts payable situated." The statement reminds me that Lillian isn't just another pretty face, but a smart, intelligent woman running her own business. I try to smile at her back, but I'm suddenly slightly nervous. "It's cool. I just finished a shift at work when I got your text." She raises an eyebrow as she looks me up and down. "You always work at the convenience store in a dress shirt and jeans?" Her nose twitches as she breathes in. She coughs once, and she waves a hand in front of her nose. "And do you normally wear that much cologne?" I give myself a quick sniff. I don't think I put on that much cologne, did I? It was only 5 or 6 spritzes.
And by golly, I hope you enjoy that one too as much as I enjoyed. It's always like a weird experience to hear your story come to life as an audiobook. It's a very interesting experience for me as the author. It's always super cool, the voices that Jill Smith comes up with to give life to these characters. There's definitely another layer of interest and fun to it when you hear it as an audiobook and someone actually reading it and doing these word voices and getting enthusiastic. It's super fun. I'm a big fan of audiobooks myself personally, even if I don't have as much time to listen to them anymore now that I don't have like a 2-hour commute every day. But there it is. Go check it out. It's out as Audible right now. We'll have a link in the show notes for you to click on if you wish to, go check that out, of course. Okay. In upcoming LitRPG, this is just where I read off the stuff that's coming out that I know about, that's listed on Amazon or things that authors have told me. You can feel free to skip ahead if you're not interested, but we have some new things on here as well. The District, a futuristic dungeon core, the Laboratory Book 3, is out on January the 19th. So that's going to be out the day that most people are actually watching this podcast. Pharaoh Book 7 is going to be out on January the 22nd, which is very quick. Pharaoh Book 6 came out not that long ago. The Reapers Nero Book 3 is going to be out on January the 24th, so not that far from now. Then there's Return to a Dungeon, a Monster MC LitRPG, Kobold's Quest Book 1, long title, out on January the 30th, though. The author of the Greystone Chronicles has let me know that he plans to put out his novel Darkness Falls, which is the 3rd book in that series, by January 31st or February 1st. I think there's a little wiggle room for him. So there you go. He hasn't quite finished the artwork on that yet, so I'll give you that to you as soon as he has something finalized. I don't want to give you, artwork that's not going to be, actually on the cover. Then there's on February the 1st, Bushido Online, Friends and Foes, which is the second book in that particular series, I believe. Then there is Kingdom Level 4 out on February the 20th, 2018. On February sometime. The author's a little, not as definite on this one. It's going to be The Way the Shaman Book 7 Clan Wars. It'll be out sometime in February. That's all the author knows. He doesn't actually do the translation work from Russian to English himself, but he knows February 2018. Also out on March the 6th, 2018, from the same author, Vasily Mahanenko. This one he doesn't know. It'll be out on, again, March the 6th. Restart, Dark Paladin, Book 3. So you can go check that out if you're a fan of that series. Not everybody is, though, which I'm always surprised by. I enjoy it personally, but it is very different from the Way of the Shaman series. So it doesn't work for everybody. Excuse me. Okay. Out on March the 12th, it'll be Avatar's Rising, Silos 1. On March the 16th, it'll be Achilles' Reign, Aetheria Online, Book 4. So there we go. That's everything I know about for the next few months coming up. Go check them all out, of course. On to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with... Where am I? There I am. Found me. I thought I'd change this. Okay, it's going to be the War Gods Mantle, Ascension, a LitRPG adventure. The War God Saga, Book 1 is where I'm going to start out with. And I just have to pull it up because, there you go. Written by J.E. Hunter and Aaron Crash. So this is actually from two authors who are working together on a particular project. And sometimes that's really great. Sometimes it's not so awesome. Just kind of depends on how well they work together, how good their collaborative process is. I talked to one of the authors, J.E. Hunter, about his process, and it was very interesting to see how two authors can create work together, create a story. And so we'll talk a little bit more about things that I saw as a reader that might be interesting for the story. But the novel is 345 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. The Gods Walk Again. When Marine Corps pilot Jacob Murley crashes during a routine mission over the coast of Cyprus, he was sure it was game over. After surviving the crash and pulling himself onto the sandy shores of a long abandoned island, however, Jacob unwittingly stumbles headfirst into the ancient ruins of a dead city. Unfortunately, he also stumbles into an age-old battle between good and evil, and he is now its newest recruit. The island once belonged to the Amazons, daughter of Ares, the god of war, and stood as the final bastion between the human world and the monstrosities of the great below. But Jacob's arrival has awakened the old gods and disturbed the seal holding the ravaging darkness at bay. Now, with the help of a sacred gem containing Ares' power, Jacob must recreate the Amazon defenders of humanity and fortify the island's stronghold. If he fails, Hades will unleash his army of the damned and the world of men will fall, giving rise to an age of walking nightmares. So there you go. That is the author's description. And that's pretty true, actually. It gets a little more gamey. That particular introduction does not describe the LitRPG world at all, really. But there is definitely a LitRPG world here, so don't worry about that. The first 14% of the novel is honestly probably my least favorite part of it. And I say that because there's nothing LitRPG about it. It's really just like a military action-oriented introduction. But after that 40% mark, you get into the RPG gaming world, and the novel really picks up, at least for me. And then it begins to feel like a mix of like a War of the Titans, like the 1981 version, Wonder Woman, and God of War, and a good like real-time strategy game. So a lot of fun stuff once you get past that first 14% mark. Now, just that first 40% mark honestly felt like it was written by a different person, and it probably was. And that's one of the things I was kind of pointing out about the co-author situation of like writing a novel. Like there are going to be places where there are two different distinct voices, and you can kind of see that here. I believe Aaron Crash comes from like a writing like military science fiction kind of stuff, and that definitely shows in the first 14% of the novel. Like it's very military survival stuff, and then once you drop in the game mechanics, it's a lot more. It's a very different voice, at least to me. And that maybe that's because I'm already familiar with J.A. Hunter's other series of Reading Gale Lines, and I kind of already have a big feel for like that voice that he has there as far as like explaining game mechanics in a very fun, flowy way. And it just, for me, like, oh, this is voice A, this is voice B. And I'm like, oh, and sometimes they mix. That, it is what it is. It doesn't take away from the story. It's just fun to me. Like, oh, pick out like, oh, I think, James wrote that one. I think Aaron wrote this section. Small things that I do to entertain myself, folks. Okay. And like I said, this is very Greek mythology, LitRPG oriented, and it does a really good job of like balancing between action and adventure, city building, RPG leveling, crafting, and resource management. And I think for the most part, it does a pretty good job of like keeping that balance. The focus on the story though is definitely action though. There's some really good battles between the Amazonian women against monsters sent by Hades, and the stakes being no less than man's survival. There you go. The RPG leveling of the main character specifically is very detailed. There are multiple graphics devoted to showing the skill trees for the character. There are also a lot of other game mechanics that show progression for him and the Amazonians. So like they have levels, the Amazonians do, as does the main character. It's not really a complaint. It's just like, oh, this bugged my gamer mind, is that some of the levels in the story seem to come a little bit too easy for the main character, and this is just a decision on how they decided to show those game mechanics in the story. In that, outside of the character sheet, no experience is shown for like killing monsters. Like there are references to it, like there are references to the main character getting experience for killing monsters, but it's not shown to the audience. And that's just a story. That's an author's choice. The authors don't want to show that information because it feels like it breaks the flow of the story. And for some readers, it totally does. But at the same time, they sure to show that information in the character sheets when they pop up throughout the story. And so you can kind of guess how much XP is going through, but because it's not explicitly shown, you don't get a feel for how difficult something is in the terms that the author has set in those game mechanics. So you don't get experience points earned for killing monsters, crafting, or completing a quest. Like I said, it's just it's a small little detail that's not in the narrative. And it's just, to me, it's a missed opportunity to show the reader how powerful and difficult the monsters are relative to the main character. And monsters also don't get levels the same way that the main character does. So it's really a guesswork as far as like, oh, is this a super hard monster or is this a super easy monster? And that's just one of the things that you would normally see in an RPG, and that's kind of your reference of like, oh, how hard or difficult it is. So small little detail. That's all it really is, though, for me. The RTS aspects, the real-time strategy aspects, and the creative aspects, like creating Amazons, repairing and upgrading buildings, crafting weapons, collecting and managing special resources. It's a really nice addition to the story. It adds another layer of like, oh, some new things for you to kind of geek out about if you're into that kind of stuff. It actually provides a good break from the action, and again, adds another layer of interest for LitRPG readers. There are, again, a few points where there is a lack of consistency, and I think this is more along the lines like, oh, you have two different people writing the story or like working together to make it a cohesive thing, and things are going to get missed. At one particular point, here's an example. Okay, the Amazonian generals cost 3 to 4 divine essence points. Very clear definition of like cost of resources to make a thing, right? Later on, though, this kind of disappears for some things. For example, the main character magically plants and grows multiple crops. I mean, like a whole wheat fields, orchards of wine or grapes, I should say, figs, and whatever things they make there. Also summons like magically a herd of cows and chickens. Yet the defined cost of that is some divine essence and a splash of thymos crystals, and that's literally what it says in the text. So that particular section, like maybe they'd meant back at some point to go back and like give it some defined numbers, or there's just a little bit of magical wand waving because this is a fun portion of it where he's making beer and wine and a Mountain Dew fountain without actual defined cost, because it wouldn't really work out mathematically. And that, this is like one of those small deals, like there's a setup of cost, but later on it's like if the story kind of needs to fudge a little bit, or if they forgot, it's like, never mind, we'll forget the numbers for a second. And that's, again, just author's choice. Again, it doesn't really drop it for me. It's just small game deal that just like, hey, that doesn't make sense. Oh, well, action. So fun stuff. Like I said, these tiny inconsistencies for me don't take away much, if anything. It's just, like I said, a result of two authors working together and not everything working out perfectly the entire time. And that's, like I said, it does reflect, though, the little bit less of the RPG-ness, especially in the combat scenes, compared to the James A. Hunter's other series, which is Verding and that story is very much game mechanic oriented. But then again, that story is also set in an actual MMO, so everything should be a little more game centric because that's the entire world. And this one is set on Earth, and the main character's powers just happen to be modified so he can see them as like this RPG kind of system. So different settings. Like I said, really good story. Had a good time reading it. Plenty of numbers and details to satisfy most RPG fans. The action, though less game mechanic detailed, is really fast paced and thrilling. And the last 15% is just major battle after battle, fight after fight, really cool stuff. In like a very almost a God of War kind of way, which is where I was bringing that pull from. Overall, had a good time reading it. Personally loved again the Mountain Dew jokes. Big fan of Mountain Dew myself, and it is the fuel of all gamers, most so for the ones that I know. For me, it gets a score of 7 out of 10. Again, that's War God's Mantle, Ascension, a LitRPG adventure, the War God Saga Book 1, long title, with the score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to our next story, which is going to be the Aetheria Offline, which is kind of weird. Written by Cube Kid. There you go. This one is 138 pages. It is 99 cents, very reasonably priced. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. The Aetheria server has come to life. Join the Lost Legion and the Knights of Aetheria as they wage war against the forces of the unseen. With each installment, one reader will be selected to join an ever-growing cast. They must create their own characters whose progress will be tracked throughout the story with the character sheet. Such characters are not entirely under the control of the author. The author will ensure that each reader's characters behave according to the settings provided by the readers, as well as feedback provided in further reviews. Readers who are part of the cast will be given the opportunity to vote on important decisions such as the direction of the story and what quests to pursue. In other words, the story is not set in stone. Okay, so this is from an author who already has established written 30 Minecraft-based game stories. The target audiences on the Amazon cover is 7 to 12-year-olds. So there you go. In this particular version, this is the first time that the author has actually included it as a LitRPG story. And it's very much LitRPG. It is. So there are RPG mechanics. Characters progress to a certain degree, but there's plenty of RPG mechanics there, levels, explanation of powers, whatever, crafting. So definitely is LitRPG. No question there. There's also a very unique aspect of the interactiveness, which I've already read to you. The author gets, he will put the reader's characters in the story. Now, the way he does this is by readers who are supposed to submit their characters as reviews of the story on Amazon. And then they can help determine the course of the story on a special Discord channel or on, voting, whatever the author has. But there is a definite solicitation from the author to the kids who are reading this to create their own characters and their own character sheets as very specifically as positive reviews only. He's very specific on that point in his rules at the very end, that he'll only look at the positive reviews of the story for this, and he'll pick some people and he'll take their characters and he may put in the story and he'll take their ideas and he may write short stories about them, those story ideas. So there you go. So that's the interactiveness. And I think it's a really interesting concept as far as a collaborative storytelling. But I'll get to the other part of that opinion later. Okay. One idea though is the fact that this requirement to do this is kind of a way to inflate a review count, which seems a little shady to me. Not illegal, I think. Definitely. But it is a little like, oh, be part of this contest. Leave reviews, only positive ones though. Little, iffy there. Okay. Like I said, some reviewers have accused the author though of stealing these kids' ideas and characters. But reading the reviews on this, there's many reviews because a lot of kids will want to be part of this contest or this interactive opportunity. The kids willingly submit their characters and they seem happy to do so. So keep that in mind that the kids are willing participants. Okay, now on to the actual review of the story. The actual novel, at this point at least, is 6 short stories that are loosely related, and like I said, they're LitRPG, but they're a little iffy. Just because there's not a lot of progression there. The story takes place in a Minecraft game. Like I said, there are levels, abilities, character sheets. There, like I said, little to no RPG progression. That's more the fact that these are short stories, and sometimes some of these stories are really just pages long, and so there's not a lot of room for progression. But there are things, again, there are plenty of levels shown, character classes, all that good stuff. So for me, it's LitRPG. And so that's why it's here. There's a lot of information that is shown to the reader, but there's sometimes very little explanation. I'm not sure whether or not this is because this is part of a longer series and this is the only one he's tagged as LitRPG, or if he's just not explaining it because of the audience. Like he's assuming kids aren't going to understand it, or maybe he's already established a particular world building continuum with the established readers. But you'll see things along the line, especially this is from the first series, the first story, where the main character Elric notes that he's a level 10 knight, initiate of the 8 winds level 10, wayward sword level 3, purifier level 15, retainer of the ice hollow level 6, discipline of the silver flame 15, twilight shepherd number 1. Only there's really no explanation, none, of what those classes do, what they mean. So I'm like, that's a little, one of the things I really enjoy about LitRPG is the fact that I can understand how a game world works. So even though these game mechanics do exist in this world, there's little explanation about how it fundamentally works. And there's not a lot of definition. It kind of depends on the story, of what abilities are used or whatever. But if you're a gamer, if you've been an RPG gamer for a long time, these things kind of make sense to you. Okay. The stories themselves, I'm sad to say they're kind of boring, at least for me. I'm also a grown up. And again, this is very much targeted towards the 7 to 11 age range. So maybe I'm just not the target audience. Some of these stories are really submitted from the fans, and the author might flesh them out or, rewrite them or whatever. But sometimes it kind of shows as far as what actually happens in those stories. It might also be more entertaining to somebody who loves Minecraft. Because there are actually pictures in the novel of Minecraft screenshots of things happening, and so that might be really fun for some readers. I'm probably not the target audience. I was kind of bored personally, but for me, just as little short stories, the stories were kind of flat. There's really any setup for them. For plot, there's really not much. There's little to no foreshadowing of events or that may happen in the future. There's little to no character development. There's no background generally for characters when they're given. And it's really hard for me, just as a reader, to kind of care for these characters outside of maybe somebody who submitted their character and they saw it here. Most of the stories are really just kind of describing stuff happening, and that's kind of it. And sometimes some of these stories are actually kind of cute, but for the majority of them, there's oh, look, stuff happened. The end. For example, the first story is about Elric, and it's really just this long combat scene with a very loose and almost unexplained backstory saying the bad guy Underlord has come, Elric is going to fight him, and it's just a combat scene. I'm okay, that's cool. I would have loved to have learned about why are they fighting, who are these characters, given some backstory about each one so that I kind of care if somebody loses, and I just kind of didn't. The next story, Kolb, from a player. This is a player character. He dates an NPC, which is a very cute story, and it's basically about eating pizza together, which is a rare crafted item, almost lost to all the players in this world, and it's kind of a cute story again. The next one, Falaran, another NPC story, I should say from the point of view NPC, is also very cute. It's a very it's a story about a magician who's trying to cure the mayor of level 25 poison. And a player just comes barging in, and he's looking for his secret quest, and things get very, craft oriented. And it was, again, very cute story. But those are the only 2 stories that I was oh, these are kind of entertaining, and they have, some semblance of interest. Everything else, the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 stories, that's just stuff happening. For example, the next one is about a player character who's trying to unlock a box, but she finds a trap, and it ends. That's it, literally. The next one is about a player who provides a key for the box and they get some items, and that's it. The next one is about a character who gives them enchantments, which is, again, very in line with the story, but again, that's just it. It just ends after that. And then again and again, that's kind of the same thing happens. And then the end of the story, like literally the last like 20% of this novel is just the author explaining all the very detailed rules about, the contest and this game story and how reviewers can get a character added. Again, which includes specifically soliciting character sheets and story ideas from children and only allowing them to, I'm only looking at them if they're positive reviews on the story. So submit them as reviews for this novel, but only good ones. So I'm like, okay. And of course, there's also a glossary of items at the very end. So there you go. Overall, I think it's a very interesting experiment on collaborative storytelling. Except kind of where the part where the author keeps all the money from the sales. And that's a little iffy and shady to me personally. The nature of the stories themselves, I kind of got a score of 5 out of 10. Not very entertaining for me, but I get that I'm also not the target audience. But the concept, the kind of vaguely exploitive way the author is coming up with the stories and that they're submitted by readers, and the character sheets are submitted by readers, the characters themselves, and together him and the readers determine where the stories go is a very collaborative process to me, yet he keeps all the money. It seems kind of exploitive, and I put that in my review, that I thought it was vaguely exploitive. And again, I'm not the only reviewer who kind of thought so. So that for me gave it a score of 4 out of 10, and I put that as an Amazon review. And now here's the twist. The author of the story sent me several messages to make sure that I, saw his point. He left a message on the review itself, and he also sent me messages on YouTube. He found our YouTube channel, and he left a very detailed message on one of the episodes of the podcast, just so I know that he had a contrary opinion to it. And he seemed kind of mad. He definitely thought that the review was unfair, though. So this is the opportunity where I'm giving you the author's counter argument for a story. He basically argues a little bit about semantics. He gets a little salty, and that he doesn't think I'm a good reviewer. That's cool. I'm cool with that. But what he was specifically upset with is that I didn't talk about his writing style and his prose. And he definitely disagreed with the use of the word exploitive in the review. So those were kind of the two big, takeaways I got from his several messages. And just as a counter concept, I'm just like, okay, first for me, I don't really care about your prose or your writing style if your story is boring. Like that, the way I kind of read a novel essentially is, if you're calling yourself LitRPG, I check to see if it is. Great. If it is, I move on. Is this entertaining? If it's entertaining, great. Then I'll look at like prose, I'll look at writing style, look at all the other stuff, character development, whatever. But if it's boring, there's no point, because I didn't have a good time with it. And that is just reflected in the review. So the fact that I didn't enjoy myself means that I don't care how it's written. If it's super pretty, boring story to me, it's still just boring. And except for most of these stories, most of the short stories, they just were entertaining for me personally. And again, I'm not the target audience, so that makes sense. The second point, exploitive. Yeah, the author, again, actively selects characters from kids and story ideas from them. He writes them in this particular novel, and I don't know if he does in others. I haven't read them, so I can't speak to them, using those characters and ideas, but he, again, keeps all the money. And then, so I'm like, yeah, that seems kind of exploitive to me. Again, it may not be illegal in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying that it is, but to me, it does seem kind of shady and exploitive, especially considering that he has the readers artificially inflate the review score by submitting that stuff as reviews for the story, so that it increases the reviews on Amazon. That's my opinion. Like I said, everybody might think differently. It's okay. I'm fine with that. But I'm directly addressing the author's response. So there you go. But for me, again, that's going to be Aetheria Offline, a LitRPG Saga, maybe not. It gets a score of 4 out of 10 for me, at least. So there you go. Okay, on to our next review. Down She Falls, a LitRPG, The World of Ingot series, book 1, written by Coco Van Ross. So, okay. This is 212 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. Solace Online. A game world with a rich Excel and the poor are tasked with with proving themselves. On the outside, it may seem like an escape from the life of the stations, giant skyscrapers that loom above the landfilled, suffocating Earth. Unfortunately, a system defined by class exists in both realities. Dion, a girl from the bottom rung, must prove herself not only in Solas Online, but also in the stations. Maidon, a boy from the top tier, will do all he can to stay under the radar, especially a particular person's. The emergence of a quest chain will burst both sides. Solas Online and the stations will have their hopes resting on a small group of players. Will the players be able to prove themselves? Welcome to Solas Online, where realities collide and quests are king. So there you go. Not a bad introduction. It's a little vague at some points, but it's fine. This is a multi-narrative story that switches between the characters every few pages. And again, it's like, I want to say like 4 or 5 different characters are in the story, and you'll switch between them a lot. And for some people, that's going to be challenging. Like I'm not a huge fan of multi-narrative stories. Like I'd rather like see 1 or maybe 2 characters where I can follow them for a little bit and invest in these characters. And that was one of the issues I had with the story, in that I spent so little time with any particular character. It's really hard for me personally to invest in the story for each one, because they do run in parallel for a very long time, and eventually they kind of cross over, which is the case with the stories. But again, it's always switch. I'm like, so it works for you, doesn't it? The standout character again is the one on the cover, Dion. She's really the only one besides this girl that I even had mildly interest in. And honestly, there's a player who is showed in a VR game, and he becomes a squirrel in the VR game, and that's his character. It's a monster character, and honestly, I like that character more than one of the main characters, I should say. It's a very cute character. She is from the slums and is unjustly imprisoned inside a VR game, but thanks to her word quirk, doesn't become a monster that rich players kill repeatedly, which is kind of the justice system or the imprisonment system in this world. Instead, she's dropped off somewhere else, and she gets a chance to level, craft, and be drawn into a very big plotline. And again, that storyline is probably I want to say super interesting, because it at some points it is very interesting, but it's probably one of the only better things about the novel. Everything else is kind of bland, at least for me. It's not bad or anything. I'll get into some of the details in a second, but it just wasn't particularly interesting in a lot of ways. The world is described in the first 10% of the novel, and is described as a dystopian world where everything has been stratified. Tech, wealth, resources, power, and the only way to move up in society is to do while playing the VR game Solas Online. Only the folks at the bottom, who literally live in trash, never get a shot at getting the expensive VR equipment needed to play. And this is one of those things I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Except when they break the law, or just to no guard. Then they're thrown into a VR world with the expensive equipment, and they play as monsters for players to kill repeatedly. And those monsters feel every wound and every death, and it's kind of a torture system. And that's another point of this. Like, it's a darker world here. Like, I think the first thing that the girl on the cover does, Diana, is she snaps a baby bear's neck. I'm like, it's a brutal world, I guess. But like I said, the description I just gave you about the kind of the introduction of the story is a lot clearer and more understandable than the first 10% of this novel. It's kind of one of those things that might not make you enjoy the story, I guess. It's like the first 10% is kind of a messy description of this world. And once the story gets into the game stuff, the writing gets better, but the first 10% is rather rough. On the technical side of it, the writing is awkward. There's a constant mix of like present and past tenses. And I'll give you some examples real quick just to show you what I mean in the story. Some very early examples is, the people that went against the enforcers and are succumbed to this are called the Helmed. Another example is, not even one of them is without their gas mask on. Again, them including a singular. So there's some just technical issues. This last one was just like, what is she saying? Or what are they saying? Their stomachs grumble as they sprint down the spiral staircase, a wrapping of DNA. I'm like, are they saying the people are DNA wrappers, or like the spiral staircase? It's not clear. And while the writing improves, while the writing improves as the novel goes on, especially once you get away from like the sci-fi world and get into like the more fantasy setting, which is a little easier to describe, it there are still issues. Like there's still rather regular awkward moments where I'm like, well, I was scratching my head saying, I don't know what the author means here. I'm just going to ignore it and move on. Something else that doesn't improve as the novel goes on is kind of the logic of the story in game world. There's an explanation, again, early on in the novel about the social and economic systems, and they're just not really well described. And then there's also a lot of like magic wand waving to advance plot points. For example, very early in the story, 3 of the multiple main characters, who are all poor kids, they're shoved into the game world. But the explanation like why they're shoved in the game world or how the bad guys found them is completely just wand wave. It's literally they're running around. And they're trapped by the guards, and they get thrown into these headsets, which are super expensive, and doesn't make sense why you use them for criminal punishment, but they are. But there's never explanation like why, or how the guards found them. It's just they did because the plot needed them to be trapped in that game world. And throughout the story, that happens fairly regularly. The plot needs to go in a certain direction, and so there's like because and. It moves in that direction. And that's just, like I said, it's just a writing choice. It always stuck in my mind like, oh, that hurts my brain a little. The game system itself is also like that in a lot of ways. Like, so once you get into after like that 10%, there are plenty of RPG stuff. This is an RPG novel. It uses stats, character sheets, skills, items. There's lots of descriptions for those items and skills and character sheets. Total LitRPG, lots of work done as far as like the game system goes. And of course, the main character increases in power. Total LitRPG, absolutely 100%. However, there's sometimes a fundamental logic issues in like describing that game system in the story and making it make sense that doesn't work. For example, the main character level 1 is dropped in an area described as a high level monster area, and yet she's able to kill multiple monsters in the area as a level 1 character with really no particular issue, including like a baby cub, which she snaps the head. It's like, grrr, which is, including like rabbits, squirrels, cats, baby squirrels, baby cats, again, with little or no trouble. And if she's in a high level zone, that shouldn't quite work out as easily as it did in the story. Like it's literally, throws a knife, snaps a bear's head, that kind of stuff. Additionally, some of the math just doesn't work in my brain. And again, this is the author's choice of like, they chose to actually put out experience numbers. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes it doesn't work. But if you put them out, people are going to check your math. They're going to check like the logic of like the progression according to the terms that you put out there. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, yes, you're going to satisfy people who love big numbers, but at the same point, it's going to be like, oh, this may not work. The numbers don't work out. And this is kind of the case. The main character seems to like, there's a whole string of like, oh, level when she kills every monster. But like every single monster she kills, despite the different number of experience points she gets, gives her a level. And that just doesn't make sense in my brain. Because most RPG systems have a progression system where the higher level you get, the more experience points are required to level, and that doesn't seem to exist here. And it's not explained why. It's not explained how that occurs. So if this was just the way the novel worked, great, but there's no explanation that there's a flat experience points count. And it's just one of those things that kind of sounds like, oh, there's effort made to describe this game world, but some of the progression system isn't as logically thought out as like just stating information about, oh, this is an item description, this is a character description, or a skill description. And it just kind of stands out. And again, it really does show that the author put a lot of effort and work into making this an RPG, a LitRPG novel. But it's equally clear that it's thrown aside whenever the story kind of wants to go a certain way, and those mechanics will be ignored if that's what the story kind of demands. There are multiple examples where this kind of wand wavy stuff happens, whether it's like a character who magically discovers a needed clue or a unique ability, where there's no justification or logical explanation for that according to the game rules. And that's just kind of the way it is. Like the story needs to move forward in a certain direction. And so these things are kind of miffed a little bit. And to me, that just drew away from the story, because one of the things again, this is me, I love about LitRPG is that this is a game world which set rules. Things aren't iffy. Like you can't bend these game rules as much as you can in real life or in like social structures. Or it's like, because it's magic. Like, these are actual game rules set in code. And so there should be less of that, to me at least. So overall, between the early problems of the writing, the lack of logic throughout the story, for me at least, and the lack of connection to most of the characters, I was never really invested in the story. There are some scenes which are fun and interesting, and I'm always a sucker for crafting the story, and there is that in here. Just most of the story was not entertaining for me, and the lack of logical explanations for some things really was genuinely frustrating for me. So it gets a score of 5 out of 10. Again, just kind of meh for me. Not necessarily bad, but just not exciting, not quite good. So there you go. Down She Falls, a LitRPG, The World Ingot Series Book 1 gets a score of 5 out of 10. There we go. Okay, on to our next review. It's going to be Dungeon Crisis, a LitRPG Dungeon Core Adventure, Glendaria Awakens Trilogy Book 2. So now we're getting into the books that have, second, third, fourth in the series, which should hopefully be a little shorter reviews. Written by Jonathan Brooks. This one again, the Dungeon Crisis, Book 2 in that series. It is 157 pages, $3.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Now that price point in particular, way too high, in my opinion, for an outright purchase for 157 pages for $3.98. That's about double, more than double what I would normally pay for, per page count. But it is available on Kindle Unlimited, so go check it out if you have that particular one. You don't actually necessarily need to read book 1, but they're connected storylines. The author's description. When Krista and Devin first started playing Glendaria Awakens, they had no idea they would end up in charge of operating a dungeon. Now, after leveling up, they have a crisis on their hands. A new item, a dungeon core, is now the target of every guild in the game. If the core is stolen and kept away for a length of time, they will cease to exist. Devin must find enough powerful monsters to put in the dungeon, while Krista has to build the perfect floor to keep them away from their only hope of surviving. So there you go. All this has, and they have to try to coexist with their new guardian. Okay, this is a very easy review. This is a Dungeon Master story, and if you don't know what that is, this is basically it's either Dungeon Core or Dungeon Master or Dungeon whatever, but it's a dungeon creation and exploration story where the big focus of the novel is making the dungeon, mapping out new traps, new maybe puzzles or whatever. Spawning monsters, and that's kind of the focus of the story, and maybe having adventurers come in and test out your dungeon or fight in there. There are a number of other like Dungeon Master stories, like the Divine Dungeon series or the Slime Dungeon Chronicles, just to name a couple, that are also really fun. And this is in the same line of like, oh, that's the focus. The story is about two people who are trapped in this game. They have to use their skills to build and run a dungeon and defeat the hordes of players looking to get their dungeon core. The first half of the novel is completely preparation, as the two main characters create these new dungeon levels, plan new traps, lure in monsters, and experiment with new monster placements and creation of hybrid monsters. And that's kind of the cool dungeon building stuff. So if you're into that kind of story, if you like games like Dungeon Master stories or video games where you're like kind of creating and have to be like creative to make really good levels, this is going to be an enjoyable portion of the story. Not everybody likes that kind of story though. The last half of the novel is really just the dungeon being run by a variety of groups with varying degrees of success. I won't spoil anything, but that's what that is. There's also like a love triangle thing going on between the two trapped people who grew up together, the guy and the girl, and a newly released guardian who's hot and chesty and has a major case of the crazy girl. And that's kind of it. That's kind of the story in a nutshell. And if you either like it or you don't, most of the story is just really dedicated to making the dungeon. So if you like that, it's a fun read. I like that kind of story. I'm really into that kind of stuff, even as it is here. For me, it gets a score of 7 out of 10. That's Dungeon Crisis, a LitRPG Dungeon Core Adventure with a score of 7 out of 10. See, that was short, easy. Okay. Soul Reckoning, a LitRPG Adventure, Veilwalkers Book 2, written by Isaac Winter. Here we go. This one is 270 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. The author's description. Winston Beckett is a man of two worlds. There's the one he lives in, and the parallel game universe called the Veil. His adventure is far from over. When remnants of the Veil start leaking in everyday life and causing universe-rending tears, Winston may be the only one who can save Earth. But can he rescue his friends and stop the tears before it's too late? Join Winston as he solves new mysteries, makes new friends, and fights for the very existence of both the game world and their own. Okay, so this is actually, again, a multi-narrative story between Winston, Kale, and his friend Lori. So again, it switches back and forth between their two storylines. Okay, in book 2 of our story, our hero, Winston/Kale, sees his friend Lori kidnapped by a monster and taken through a rift into the Veil. Lori is forced into a gnome character and has to figure out where she is and how to survive. Winston magically finds some other way into the world and looks for his friends. Together have to figure out why the Veil is acting so weird and stop whatever the author has planned. That's my summary of it. My biggest issue with book 1 in the series was that the hero never felt like he earned anything. You can read that on our website at geekpodcast.com, in the LitRPG section for the review of the particular story, book 1. But everything in the novel kind of seemed like it was handed to him, and nothing really seemed too important, including his game powers and the advancements of the plot. And in book 2, some of that still exists. So if it bothers you like a ton in book 1, don't read this. It's going to bother you here. But there is less of it. Like, the author definitely has made progress in making things feel like the main character earns them. There are actually several moments in the character. I mean, even though there are several groan-inducing moments, when I was reading this, I was like, that seems weird. Like, that feels like the author was stuck and it's just like, oh, someone happens to find the magic clue that tells them what's happening, thus advancing the plot. But again, it's a lot rarer in this story than it was in book 1. The single biggest and most welcoming improvement in book 2, however, is the fact that the hero can and does fail. I think this is a very important point of growth for this particular story. And that there are several instances when the main character, Winston/Kale, flat out fails a quest. And in one case, it's really kind of a sad loss. And to me, that makes the story more interesting. It informs the reader that the hero may fail the big quest to save the world. And that, to me, adds stakes. And I think that's a good, important point of growth for this particular series. And that the main character can potentially lose because he does lose several quests. It's not ambiguous. It's like, oh, he failed big time. And that sucks for somebody. The ending of the story has a really nice puzzle and dungeon dive aspect, which is a nice break from some of the fights, which this is kind of another thing. There's only one kind of monster that they fight. And I'm like, you couldn't have variety here? I'm like, that seems weird. But again, just a small thing. Overall, the improvement in the story kind of makes up, for me at least, some of the flaws, and I had a fairly good time reading this. This one was kind of on the edge of like 6.9, 7.0, and for me, I was like, okay, I'll give it a 7 because there was improvement in the story, and I had a better time than I did reading it in book 1. So for me, it gets a score of 7 out of 10. That's Soul Reckoning, a LitRPG adventure, Veilwalkers book 2, with a score of 7 out of 10. There you go. Okay, this one is Headshot 2 in the Head, book 2 of the Zombie LitRPG Trilogy, written by Matthew Sieg. Okay, it is 308 pages. It is $2.99, perfectly priced to me. Available on Kindle Unlimited. This is the author's description. Last week was equal parts action-packed thrill ride and walking nightmare. Ryan's plan to save himself from the server wipe may have succeeded, but at what cost? He's willing to sacrifice a lot to get even with the people that betrayed him, but when a larger, darker, and far more complicated world opens up before him, will he make his own destiny or frantically attempt to log out for the final time? And once he decides, what happens when he isn't in control either way? Okay. You should know up front, this almost feels like an entirely different series than book 1, and that there are a couple reasons for that. The readers are either going to really like this or they're not. From the other reviews on Amazon, it kind of seems like it falls that way. If you're expecting the same zombie apocalypse story from book 1, this is not it. This is entirely the other side of the coin, where it's the players and the survivors side of the story. And there almost are no zombies in this entire novel. So just be aware of that going in, so your expectations are adjusted at least when you read it. Okay, the game mechanics in the story are also different. Again, not the same zombie MMO story you read. In book 2, it's the main character, Ryan, is stuck as a ghost who follows the antagonist from book 1, Sasha. And this novel is mostly about her. It's very much more introspective. There's a lot less combat, and again, almost no zombies in this entire thing. in the entire novel. And as a matter of fact, you don't get to see zombies again almost till the very end. Instead, it takes place on Survivor Sunday, a day where all the zombies are kicked out of the server, and the human survivors get a chance to grind skills, gather resources, and prepare for when the zombies return. There's player versus player, and the human survivors can kill each other, but permadeath is turned off. Remember in book 1, if a character died, no matter whether they were a zombie or a survivor, they lost that character, and they had to roll a new one. In this case, on Survivor Sunday, no permadeath. So the players can die as many times as they need to. They'll lose resources. They'll lose whatever they're carrying, but they won't lose their character. So that's also another difference here. And again, the game mechanics are different because they're on the survivor side. And the game mechanics in the story are kind of cool. They are different from the zombie version, which is good. And, it's just different. It's almost a combination of stuff from Fallout and Elder Scrolls. During character creation, survivors get to choose characteristics that give them bonuses to particular skills. They can choose classes that give an initial set of skills, like engineer, nurse, doctor, soldier, whatever. There are no levels in this game. There are stats, though. There are a lot of other RPG stuff like health bars, mana bars, or health bars, and other things like that. But there are no levels. Instead, everything has a skill-based percentage of success or fail, and these skills can be increased from either practice or from reading special skill books, and that's something that's pulled from like Elder Scrolls. All the items in the game, or items that they find, either have to be found through salvage or from looting other players, or crafted if the character has that particular skill. So there you go. So a lot of good mechanics that you can be interested in, lots of different ways of progressing. The story itself. If you've ever seen the movie Ghost, the 1990 movie with Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze, the main character kind of takes that Patrick Swayze role as a ghost who cannot interact with the physical world, but he's instead forced to passively watch. As Sasha, he's kind of tethered to her. I won't spoil why. As she creates her latest survivor character. And for most of the story, the main character, it kind of takes on the role of a narrator in describing what she's doing and his thoughts on it. And we sometimes get insights into her thinking process, because again, he's connected to her in some mysterious way, which will be revealed in the novel. And he kind of gets to see what Sasha's thinking, where her role is, and why she's doing the thing that she does. And there are even glimpses into her past to explain why she, hates the game company so much. And again, the story is really about her and how she's playing the game and trying to deal with the traumas of her past and deal with loss for her point of view, and taking revenge on the game company that she felt wronged her. And that's what the story is on a fundamental level. Like I said, it really is a big shift from book 1, in that book 1 was about the main character. It was about him and his issues and him playing as a zombie in this free-to-play classified system where the rich got great advantages and the mass of people got to play zombies, but they were very limited, and it was like the mass versus like the few, rich survivors kind of thing. And that's not what this is necessarily anymore. Outside again, the end of the novel, again, there are only a handful of action scenes in this story. Again, this novel focuses more on survival aspects of this game, for humans at least, for the survivors. There's lots of scurrying around, scavenging for resources, finding a place to practice her skills is a big part of the story, trying to avoid the player versus player combat systems. There's also a thread for Sasha for finding ways to hurt the game company and the company's kind of counter moves, which are very interesting sometimes. And there's a lot of introspective moments in the story where the main character again gets glimpses into Sasha's thinking and into her past, and it's a lot of character development stuff here. Overall, I had a good time with the story. I like this kind of story, but I also know that not everybody is, especially if they're expecting almost the same kind of story and action-oriented system that book 1 was. Again, this is very different. And so just go into it with that expectation and understand that this is something different, at least. If you can appreciate a slower, more introspective story with less action and almost none of the zombies from book 1, then you might really like this story. But if you don't, if you're expecting exactly what book 1 had, this is going to be a disappointment. So just adjust your expectations. Again, I had a good time with it. It gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. Again, Headshot 2 in the Head, book 2 in the Zombie LitRPG Trilogy with a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to our last review. It is going to be The Trap for the Potentate, Dark Herbalist, book 3. This is written by Michael Atamanoff. So there you go. This is always kind of a fun series for me. There is 291 pages, $5.99, so a little bit expensive. It is also not available on Kindle Unlimited. So you're almost paying 20 cents per page. And so for some people that might be too much, but for me, This was probably the best novel in the series, and I'll get into that in a second. I should read you the author's description first. Okay, author's description. The great hunt is over. In the end, Timothy managed to keep his invaluable prize. A victory, perhaps, but glory and adrenaline are very powerful narcotics, and tolerances build quickly. Once deprived of them, life immediately becomes gray and bleak. What's more, his beautiful lover, or to be more accurate, both of them, is beginning to transparently hint that she could find herself a more interesting beau. What is a talented player to do in this situation? The solution suggests itself. Rush headlong into the most dangerous adventures, taking risks and walking the blade of a knife. Timothy must do everything in his power to survive in places where making a clean escape is entirely impossible, delighting the viewers with his utterly unique playing style and proving decisively to his lady, or to be more accurate, both of them, that his previous success was no mere coincidence. Will it be hard? Very. But old reliable friends are still by his side, and that means victory is possible. I think I'll say that description is slightly not accurate, at least from my point of view. There's a lot less focus on like proving himself to his ladies and more to like proving himself to his boss who wants to fire him. And that's where this novel starts off at. Overall, when I was reading this story, I was like, wow, whoa, that easily didn't go in the direction that I thought it was going to be. And to me, this is, again, the best novel in this series so far. I really like book 1. I believe I give it a 8 out of 10. Book 2 dropped a little bit just because I'm not into pirates as much. And it was very much more action oriented. And book 3 kind of returns a lot of the same stuff I loved about book 1. For example, in book 1, this series felt fresh, felt very interesting because the main character was not human. And that's relatively rare in our genre, in that most people can see themselves as a human, but not being a human requires that an author can place their mindset in a different societal structure and being a monster and the things that are there. And that's not easy. And so the fact that this character was a monster was what made it interesting, at least. And the fact that it had a very unusual combo class of like being an herbalist, I'm like, even more interesting. And I liked those parts of it. And the fact that the main character, because he was a very relatively weak class and weak species or race, had to think of different ways of problem solving in book 1. And he needed allies to kind of shore up his deficiencies. So it made a very fun, interesting story for me. And book 2, again, it drifts away from that. In book 3, it's back. The author gets back to herbalism, like the dark herbalist returns to herbalism, which is always a weird thing to review in like book 2's reviews. Like, hey, where'd the herbalism go for the dark herbalist? I'm like, in book 3, it's back. Don't worry about that. But it also gets back to those same interesting ways of problem solving. Outside of like a couple of like large battle scenes, there's almost no combat in the story. Instead, each problem and plot thread is resolved through other very creative ways. And I really love seeing our goblin hero figure out solutions to these things, whether these are problems in real life or in the game. I'm not going to spoil any of the plot twists because I think that's a really big draw for the story, in that you don't see some of these things coming and they're really cool, at least to me. But I'll say that there are multiple instances when I was reading the story, I was like, wow, that's neat. That's cool. I didn't see that thing going that way. And I was genuinely surprised and delighted. That's some of the directions that the story takes. So there are a few places where there's some magic wand waving to get the plot moving in a particular direction. But the resulting stories were so interesting and so cute and fun that I don't mind in this particular case. And again, it's relatively rare in the story that happens. Overall, I think it's a great read. Again, I think it's the best in the series so far. Even if you haven't read book 2, if you've only read book 1, you can probably still read book 3. Like, there's a really good recap at the beginning to kind of fill in the gaps for book 2. And for me, it's just, like I said, a great read. Gets a score of 8 out of 10 for me. Trap with the Potentate, The Dark Herbalist, book 3, with a score of 8 out of 10. I thought it was great. So there you go. That's it. We are done, folks. That's it for the show. Remember that you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Patreon. And you can find out all the ways to support the podcast at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But again, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for listening to me gush about the genre that I love and these novels that I read weekly because, well, I love reading them and I love sharing this community that we have together. So thank you very much for hanging out with me in my home as I talk about these things. Until we can meet again and talk some more next week, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.